Life is a series of ups and downs, wins and losses. And sometimes all we can see is what's right in front of us. The next hurdle, the next goal, the next challenge. But there are moments when we realize that our triumphs and our struggles, our victories and our defeats have brought us to this very moment. And it all comes down to this.
I don't know about you guys, but I think that new song, like, I just want to throw up the rock fist and, like, you know, that's good stuff. Hail to arena rock, and a comeback would be killer. Anyway, so I am so excited. We're in the middle of the series. We've been doing this series called It All Comes Down to This. We've been talking about all things sports. It's January, it's football month. So we're kind of building in a lot of these elements because there are tons of things that we can learn from the world around us as we compete, as we cheer for people who compete. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. I'm not an athletic person. If you're new here, it's probably real obvious, and I didn't really need to say that. If you've been here before, you've heard me say it before. But there's lots of competition stuff around us that makes sense to us and that we can kind of learn from, and we can take some stuff from and live differently. One of them is our traditions in sports. There's a lot. I didn't realize how much. There's a ton of tradition. I mean, there's teams that just have a dynasty kind of reputation, right? There are things that some of you are cheering already, right? Some of you have a dynasty of losing, right? And it's just a thing that you're real excited about. I know. There's all kinds of stuff that you're like, man, we do this all the time. There are traditions that happen in every game, every time. Like, play the national anthem. Everybody stands up, right? Cover your heart. You know, am I supposed to cover my heart? Am I not supposed to cover my heart during this one? Or is that the pledge? I can never remember, so I just cover it because you feel bad if you don't. And so you do all that kind of stuff. There's things like playing the national anthem that are pretty much every time, like shaking hands after a game. You know, players play a game. They can hate each other, scream, yell, fight. It's hockey, right? They can fight on, and I love hockey because they let them fight. This is fantastic, and it lasts longer than the McGregor fight did, right? Like, and so they just let it go. I mean, if they would let him play, no one else would play, right? So, but after the whole thing's over, they shake hands. I mean, you and McGregor last night, like, he beats the living garbage out of this guy, and then hugs him on the ground while he's still bleeding from the face. It's tradition. We do it all the time, right? We play the national anthem. We do these things. We know these kind of standard traditions that happen in every sport, every single time. But then each team kind of has its own traditions, you know, things that they do. There's this little NAIA school in Indiana, and it is literally school. You think I'm going to say like IU or something like that. But there's this little NAIA school that is in Indiana called Taylor University. I don't know if you've ever heard of Taylor, but Taylor is a school where a bunch of my friends went to school, didn't know they had this tradition, but they have a tradition that's crazy. So like the night before finals in the fall semester, before kind of Christmas break and before that kind of stuff happens, there's this one particular game they call the Silent Night Game. And the Silent Night Game is crazy because kids, the night before finals, camp out the whole night before. And every kid, every student goes to this one game, this little tiny gym, and they pack in there in total silence. Okay, so for the first 10 points of the game, for those 9 points of the game, they're in total silence. All you hear is a couple of coaches yelling at their kids and squeaking of tennis shoes, and that's it until the 10th point. And the school tradition is they come unhinged, right? And they're not just cheering and yelling and screaming from the stands. They rush the floor in the middle of the game, and it just shuts everything down for a minute until they get everybody back in their seats. And it's the tradition, and I watch it. Go ahead, I'm telling you, Google it. Watch it. You'll be like in the rabbit hole for years because there's unbelievable numbers of traditions, crazy ones. Like, for instance, the Detroit Red Wings. If you didn't know this already, they're a hockey team. They hockey. You play on this thing called ice. It's like when things get really cold, water gets cold, it freezes, and they lay it down, and they play hockey on it, and they throw, in the first game of the playoffs for the Detroit Red Wings, they throw octopus. I don't know what the plural of octopus is, but it seems like I'm going to get in trouble for trying, so we're just going to leave it alone. So, but they throw thingies, right, vertebrae, whatever, onto the ice because there are 8 more playoff games until the Stanley Cup Finals, right? And so they go through, it's crazy, right? And then they got tired of every time the Red Wings wanted to play in Nashville, again, hockey over in Nashville, and the Predators, they got tired of the fact that every time the Red Wings wanted to play there, the stadium would fill up all of a sudden. And so instead of throwing octopus, does anybody know what they throw? Catfish. I have no idea why a catfish. That's a weird thing to throw. I guess we just have a lot of them or whatever. They just chuck them out there, and then they cart them over and serve them to us at like the catfish places around here. I don't know what they do with that, but that's crazy. Who comes up with these stupid traditions? Who thought of an octopus? Who thought, hey, let's get everybody to be quiet for a few minutes? Who thinks of these crazy things? But they are cool for us, aren't they? I mean, they're fun to be around. They're fun to participate in. Church is kind of like that, right? At times you get this traditional stuff that goes on around churches. Some churches, like I've been a part of, more liturgical churches, you might call them more traditional or more formal churches, where people wear robes, and like they wear the robes, they have the candles, and they have the certain kind of people, like different people who do different things, and they have like a liturgist, and the pastor gets to wear. I was thinking it'd be so cool to wear a robe. It'd be fun, because I don't have to worry about what I'm wearing. And you know what I do every single week? I look at the video from last week to find out if I'm wearing the same thing today that I wore last week, because I don't want to wear the same thing 2 times in a row. And so I have that, but if you're wearing a robe, you can wear whatever you want, And if you're really mad at people, you could just wear nothing, And it's traditional. It's kind of fun. So there's that part of it, but then there's other like more rich traditions, things like maybe you grew up in a church that celebrated Advent, the days leading up into Christmas, or maybe Lent. By the way, it's Lent, not lint. Lint is in your belly button, okay? But Lent is like this time leading up to Easter, 40 days, kind of leading up into this beautiful celebration, really rich, deep tradition. It's not in Scripture. It's not something that Scripture tells us to do, but it's something that we can do that is kind of a traditional way of celebrating a holiday or different things. The church is steeped with kind of traditions around here. But there's also things that happen in sports and in church, that there are superstitions, It's not traditions like throwing a catfish out or throwing an octopus onto the ice or certain things. There's superstitions that athletes go through especially. They're like, I use the same socks every single game and I don't wash them. Or use the same underwear. These people are not married. But they wear these same, they're superstitious about it. I was looking at a couple of these this week, and I was just trying to think of, like Tiger Woods, does anybody know what his superstition is? He wears a red shirt on the Sunday of any major tournament. He wears the red shirt tucked in. He's been doing it since his junior golf days. Been wearing the red shirt on the final day of the tournament. That's pretty crazy kind of tradition. Anybody know what Michael Jordan's superstition thing was? Seriously, anybody? Shorts, exactly. The UNC shorts that he wore under his bull shorts. He had his bull shorts. He went to the equipment manager and said, listen, I need you guys to work with the manufacturer, and I need you to cut the inseam 5 inches shorter so that I can fit my UNC shorts. And this is one of the most talented players known to mankind of any sport, so much better than LeBron James will ever be. But thank you. Okay, we can go home now. I'm good. But so this is one of the most talented. Doesn't need luck. He doesn't need superstition. He's phenomenal. Today he could beat LeBron James, but still, but he still has these superstitious things. There's this one guy, I couldn't remember his name, but he was this guy, Kevin Romberg from the Cleveland Indians. Anybody heard of Kevin Romberg? Probably not, right? Kevin Romberg would not turn right on the day of a game. He would not, if he had someone there, he would not turn right to get it. He would go this way to get it. Because He wouldn't turn right. He only wanted to turn left all day. And another thing, he wouldn't touch anyone who had touched him. If they touch him, he wouldn't touch them back. So you could imagine all of the crazy teasing that would get you in a locker room, right? I mean, could you imagine? I would relentlessly torture this man. I'd punch him. You can't touch me. What are you going to do? You know? So, but there's superstition and tradition. And the problem sometimes in church, in our world, is that we get those two kind of overlapped. We do things and think it does something. Isn't that kind of weird? And that's the thing that you and I have to kind of really be careful with, is that our tradition and our superstition don't get confused. And it's super important for us, because every single one of us have this thing that could possibly happen in us, is that we start thinking that the things that we do are what produces the results that we get in terms of our observances. And what the coach wants you to know today, what's the most important thing for you to kind of keep in mind, is be aware of the distinction between tradition and superstition. You and I, in day-to-day life, especially when it comes to church stuff, we've got to be really careful to know the difference between tradition and superstition, because we get it kind of really confused sometimes. We have a tendency to think that if I do this, it'll make God happy with me. If I make sure that I show up at church, right? If I make sure I give, if I make sure I serve, then all of the things will work out in my favor, right? If I give, this will happen. If I don't give, something bad's gonna happen, right? If I serve, I'll be a good person. I do these good things, then I'm kind of do it. And I want you to get something, this is so important for us, that karma doesn't exist. There is no like balance to the universe where we're gonna do something and manipulate something from God. Here's the important thing for us to understand. Our traditions, our expressions, they both reveal and lead our hearts. They don't manipulate the heart of God. And that's important for us to get. I'm gonna say it again because I want us to kind of settle in on it for our brains, is that our traditions, the things that we do, showing up at church, serving, giving, those things, all that stuff reveals our heart, it leads our heart toward God, but it does not in any way manipulate the heart of God. He doesn't love you because you give. He doesn't love you because you serve. He doesn't love you because you show up at church. He doesn't love you because you went all day yesterday without getting angry with your kids. He loves you, period. Like he loves you, and that's the end of the story. He's not going, hey, do this and I love you a little bit more. If you'll do this for me, I'll do this for you. That's not the way this works. This is important for us to get, he is God the Father, not the Godfather. He's not the one who's like, oh, you do this for me and I'll love you back. That's not how it works. We do the things that we do to reveal our heart and to lead it toward God, not to manipulate his heart toward us. It's so important we get that. Now, we got traditions around here. So we're like, well, we're not a traditional church, right? You know? You ever invited somebody to church, and you've invited them, and everybody here has been invited probably by somebody, right? And probably at some point they said, you should come to my church. But it's not that kind of church. You know, like just gotta know. Like they're like, well, I don't know if I have any church clothes, right? And we tell them, we got this tradition. Our only dress code is please do, right? We just want you to have clothes on when you get here. That helps us, right? You know, and those kinds of things. So we don't have like those deep kind of traditional traditions, you know? But we do have traditions around here. And we kind of fall into them fairly easily. Not all that long ago, I took a rare opportunity. Bryce was on vacation. That's rare enough. But when Bryce was on vacation, I had this bright idea because I thought, hey, I can do something that I know he would say no to while he's here. And so I had us take communion, and I said, hey, at the end of communion today, what I think we should do, since Bryce isn't here, is crunch these cups, right? I thought it would be cool. We'll have this like audible, like everybody's crushing the cups, you know? And it'll be so cool. And then we'll just do it this one time and go away. It was 3 friggin' months before I could get you people to stop crunching your cups. I'm like, I had to make announcement after announcement after announcement going, hey folks, we're gonna not do that because visitors are walking in and be like, what are these people doing? They're crazy, right? Everybody's crunching the cups. People with auditory issues were like panicking and calling me, texting me and saying, please make them stop. I don't know what to do. It makes my skin crawl. And then the people who help clean up between and after services were like, there's freaking plastic everywhere, right? Because not only were we crunching them, we were just throwing them on the ground, right? And so like we fall into tradition so easily. It's so easy for us to become this kind of rhythmic people. And we love those things. But we have some traditions around here that we do all the time. You just may not realize it. Came to church. You know, like a couple of years ago after Easter service, everybody's packed in like crazy. We're having a blast. It was an awesome service. I said, hey, I just want you all to know we do this junk every week. You know, like I know some of you are only going to come today and then, you know, again in Christmas time, but we do this stuff every week. We get together every single week at Journey. Right? We sing every single week at Journey, and it's not just because we have the best live music in Jackson. Like, I think you can clap for that. That's for real. But it's killer, isn't it? But we sing every single week. We take communion every week. We baptize people. Those are all traditions, aren't they? So I thought, man, for a few minutes, let's just walk through some of our traditions and talk about why we do what we do and make sure that we are on the right side of the tradition, not the superstition. Does that make sense? So the first question I got is, why do we gather every week? I mean, why do we get together, you know? And I want to point us to a couple places in Scripture that are going to help us understand some stuff. But it's helpful for us to understand because what Scripture tells us to do is not just do these things, but reveal and lead our heart toward God through these things. That's the key piece for us. Reveal and lead our heart toward God when we do these things. So Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews, writes this out kind of encouraging us, but he does this in this bigger context. So look at Hebrews chapter 10. It says this, like verse 23-ish, I think it is. He says, let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope that we affirm, right? So he's like, hold tightly to the hope in Jesus, that God can be trusted to keep his promise. I don't know about you, but there's not a lot of more encouraging phrases in all of Scripture than that God can be trusted to keep his promise. That's huge to me. He said, let us think, right? Let us think of ways. Another translation says, let us be creatively thinking of ways. Let's figure out new, exciting ways, right? To motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And look at this part. And let's not forget, or let's not neglect our meeting together. You know, like, some people get used to doing, and I get it. Now, sometimes in church, we'll go, those are those people. It's not what it says. He doesn't say, let's not neglect meeting together like those people. He's not pushing away from someone who's figuring out. He's like, some people just have a tendency to skip a week, right? I mean, every one of us have been there at some point. I work at church, and I've been there, right? There are times where I'm like, man, I just don't want to, right? I love church as much as the next guy, but a weekend in Maui beats it hands down, okay? So, but here's the thing that we have struggles with, that we skip church, and we never intended to like bail on it and walk away altogether, did we? But we wind up doing that because once we skip once, we can skip twice, and then you're like, next thing you know, you're years down the road. There's a lot of you in this room who've told me this story. I hear this story over and over and over again. The story goes something like this. I was 18, I was 19 years old. You know, I went away to college, and then I skipped a couple of Sundays, and the next thing I know, I was 35. You know, like I didn't mean to not go to church for 20 years. It just did, you know? And he's saying, hey, listen, don't get into that habit. That's an important thing, because this gathering together is something that's so important for us to really get a hold of. In fact, let me just tell you this, especially if you have little kids. You're teaching your kids every single week, you know that? You're teaching them something. Let me just encourage you in this. Don't teach your kids to ask you if you're going to church. Teach your kids to ask you, when are we leaving? You know, like, which service are we going to? Don't, you know, when you get up in the morning and it's a question about whether or not you're going to prioritize being a part of worship today, like whether that's a question, you're teaching them to ask if. But if you could just choose to say, you know what, we're going to be a church, we're going to be a family that follows Jesus, and we gather together because it's helpful to us, it encourages us, and our church will help me take my next step toward Jesus. Like, if we could become families that do that, think about what value that would instill in your children as time goes on. If we teach our kids not to say, are we going to church tomorrow? But when are we going to church tomorrow? Such a big, important difference. And it's so important for us that when we show up at church, we gather here for the same reason we exist. We exist, Journey Church exists to help you take your next step toward Jesus. And that's so important because it also is the reason why we gather here. We want to get together because there's not a lot that we have in common. I mean, for 2 seconds, would you just look around at the people around you? Seriously, you got to turn your head to do that because they're not going to pop in front of you. Look around. You see them? They're different ages than you. They're different colors than you. Different backgrounds than you. Different abilities than you. And my guess is if we pulled this room, other than finding a lot of Titans fans all of a sudden, we could, other than that, we won't find a lot that we all have in common, will we? Right? We don't have a lot in common all the time. Church backgrounds are different, you know. Stories are different. But you know what we all have in common? We all have this one thing in common. It's the reason we started Journey Church, is to help us do it. Because the truth is, we have one thing in common. We all, every one of us, myself included, have a next step. And so when we gather together, the reason we do this is to help us spur one another, just like what he says here. Let us be creative. Let's think of, let's imagine new ways to motivate to acts of good service, of good works, things that you and I do. Because what matters isn't what we know in our brain. What matters is what we do with our hands. What matters is what happens in our hearts. So what we gather together for isn't so that we can figure out ways to teach you. You know what it's interesting to me? Is when in the context of him talking in the writer of Hebrews, talking about gathering together, he doesn't say gather them together and make sure that they know all the little crazy things about the Bible. Right? He talks about them in the context of doing things. He says, imagine ways of helping people do these things. Now, does that mean we shouldn't study God's word or that we shouldn't know things? No, it doesn't. But sometimes when we go to church, we're like, I'm just looking for something new. I want to listen so closely so that I can hear something profound from the preacher, right? Who will tell me something that doesn't really make a difference in my life, but man, is it good information. But man, is it fun to say in my head. It's fun to manipulate or to kind of figure out, and I can use it in my life. When you come to church, especially at Journey, right? When you walk through the doors, what I want you to do isn't come here and looking for something new. Come here and look for something to do. Now, I don't mean just participate in serving. I mean, when you walk in here and you sit down and you listen to me talk, you tolerate the sometimes grating sound of my voice, right? For 30 minutes, please do yourself a favor and have a to-do list when you walk out. I mean, sometimes you're like, I'm going to make a grocery list while you're talking because I'm bored out of my mind. But when you walk out of here, have like a, hey, what's my next step? So don't look for something new to store away in your brain in some useless partition, right? Look for something to do when you walk out of here. Go, man, I want to be more like Jesus when I walk out of here than when I walked into here. So what am I going to do differently? What's my next step today? Your next step today, it might be as simple as this. Show up next week, right? I mean, it might be as simple as show up next week because you're like, hey, I'm going to start prioritizing. I'm not going to teach my kids to ask if. I'm going to teach them to ask when. And so next week, when is the question that we're going to ask. And I'm going to tell them that. So that might be as simple as your next step. And you have this question in your mind. And it's one of the codes that we say. What's the most important step? It's your next one. Let me ask you that question. What is your most important step? It's your next one. Right? Where you are is not where you need to be. So where you are is to keep moving forward. That's the most important step you can ever take, is the next one. Keep taking next steps. It's the reason why we traditionally meet, so that you can walk out of here closer to Jesus than you were when you walked in. But we do another weird thing around here, don't we? We sing. Is there another public setting other than the seventh inning stretch when we sing a song together, where you stand up with a bunch of other people and you're like, let's do some corporate singing, right? Like it's a weird thing, isn't it? Like, I feel like it's like Christian karaoke, you know, like you stand up and the band plays and we sing along, you know, and it's fun. And if you looked at it on a purely physical standpoint, just like what we're doing, it feels a little weird. And my guess is there's more than one, at least more than one guy in this room who's like, I just don't know what to do, you know? Thank goodness I have a chair to stand behind, you know, because maybe you put your hands on the chair and you're just standing there. Or maybe, you're like, I look around a lot. Sorry, I have ADD. You know, I look around like, sometimes we're like this. I don't know what to do, because they're like, I'm not a singing guy, I don't know what to do. Some of us are like guys, and we're like, man, I don't know if I can sing, I don't know what to do with that stuff. And I get that, but what I want us to understand is this part of, again, Colossians. I love this book. Our small group studied it in this last semester, and it was so valuable to us. But there's this part of it where he says, let the message of Christ and all its richness fill your lives. And he says, teach and counsel each other in all the wisdom he gives. That's what we're doing here. Teaching, counseling each other in the wisdom that God gives us, helping us move forward, being creative, helping us find good ways to move forward in our good works. And he says this, sing songs and hymns and spiritual songs to God with thankfulness. Now listen, like I've been a part of church my whole life, and it can be weird, right? I mean, like I grew up in church. I tell people I was born in church, made the janitor really mad. But I've been in church all of my life, and I gotta be honest with you, this is the most relevant expression church I've ever seen in I love it, because I grew up in church where you were like, you know, God's frozen chosen. You know, like you're like, how many of you grew up in hand-raising church, like where you got your hands in there? How many of you grew up in hand-raising church? You could say, hey, you could raise your hand because you got some good chance. How many of you grew up in not hand-raising church? You see, how come you guys are the ones who get your hands up so quickly? You know why it is? Because we grew up in not hand-raising church. That's how I grew up. I grew up in no hand-raising. If you raised your hand in the middle of the song, they'd stop the song, ask you if you had a question, right? Like, because, do you need something, son? What's your problem? You know, like, but like, I grew up in that kind of a weird place where if you did the wrong thing at the wrong time, and I get that. It was super comfortable for guys that weren't very expressive, right? But I want us to get something, that what we're doing here isn't singing along with a cool song. It's not just hearing a great band, although those are very much the case for us. We're kind of spoiled in that way. What we're doing when we sing together is exactly what this verse says. We're singing these spiritual songs to God with thankful hearts. So here's what I want you to choose to do. The thing that I'd say from the coach. Don't forget to stretch. Like, it's just like any sport. Got to kind of stretch out to kind of get warmed up to get in there. And what I would say to you is when you come to church and you prioritize being here, I know it's not always comfortable, but don't forget to stretch. Like, stretch where you're at. Like, maybe if you're like this kind of guy and you're like, I'm just going to stand here and try to endure this 18 minutes and hope that like I don't die, you know, maybe just relax. Maybe that's your next step. Or maybe if you're relaxed, maybe you go, hey, listen, I'm going to try mumbling these words along. Mouth them with it. Read them, right? Just, it's really not about what you do. It's about what's going on in your heart. Because like I said before, the most important thing that you and I can do is not do traditions so that we can try and jump through a hoop, or we're not doing them like so that it manipulates God's heart. It leads and reveals our own heart. So you want your heart to be more like Jesus? Do things that are more like Jesus. So he says to us to sing these songs. So try, you know, maybe mumble them, maybe sing a little bit, right? Maybe you're not a hand raiser. Maybe you like try to hold the TV thing, you know, you know, like you just kind of hold. You know, you can graduate, you can move your way up. You know, you can go from like hold the TV to hold my baby. You know, it's a little Tim Hawkins stuff, right? But like, you know, you can move on to things. It's football season, right? You could go with goalposts, you know, like it's a touchdown. Those are good things that we can do, but we can choose our ways to stretch ourselves into something that's more significant. Another thing we do is, why do we baptize people? Real super quick on this one. It's not really brain surgery here. It's really simple. We baptize people every time people want to move forward and begin a relationship with Jesus. We baptize them because Jesus did it. If it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me, right? I mean, like if he did it, man, by all means, I need to do it. So we baptize because Jesus did it, and we baptize people because he told us to do it. In fact, we're going to baptize the young lady next service, and this is what's crazy about it. I had a conversation with a girl this week, and I said, I just want you to know something really important about baptism. She said, I want to get baptized. I want to do this in my life. This is my story. And she tells me. I said, I just want you to know two things about baptism. One, there's nothing special about baptism. But weird enough, there's something really special about baptism. There's nothing, like what I meant by that, what I told her after that is there's nothing special about the water that's in baptism. I mean, literally, might be something special-ish about it, because it gets a little dirty sometimes after people have been baptized in it. But like, there's nothing special about the water, but there is something special about obedience. Us doing what Jesus tells us to do is something that is powerful to us. It sets us free. I mean, it's an ability to go, man, I want to do what Jesus wants me to do, and I want to follow. Now, here's the thing. Some people are like, I want to follow Jesus, I just don't want to get baptized. I go, well, man, you're not going to make much of a follower if you're not willing to follow, right? He tells us to do it. We should do it. It's just obedience. And there's something special about that. And this is the other thing I told her. It doesn't change anything, but it kind of changes everything. Isn't that weird how that kind of thing works? It's like I said, I want you to know there's nothing special about baptism, but there's something really special about it. And it doesn't change anything, but it kind of changes everything. Because if we would choose to be obedient and say, man, I want to walk and I want to follow Jesus, and this is the first thing I want to do it is just be obedient, do the things that he says to do, and it doesn't change anything, but it kind of changes everything because I become a follower of Jesus, and that is transformative. That changes everything. There's nothing magic that happens. It's water we get out of a hose. But man, there's something magic about obedience. There's something powerful in changing. So somebody just asked me before service, and this is a really good question. Are we doing a baptism service? Man, I want you to know something. We'll do baptism any week. We'll do it today. We'll do it next week. We'll do it next month. We'll do it anytime you want to do, anytime you are ready to get baptized, we want to help you take that next step. But one of the ways we're going to help you take that next step is we set aside next week as a special baptism week where we're hoping that folks that are kind of on the bubble will get baptized next week. And so we got it up here on the screen. I want you to get baptized next week, January 26th, next Sunday. So if you're like, man, I'm not sure about it. What if I'm the only one with my hair wet? What if I'm the only one? No, that's not going to be the case. We already got a bunch of people signed up for next week. So we will baptize you any week, but next week's a great week. We're going to have a party about just baptizing tons of people. And if you decide at the last minute, I'm going to come to church and I'm not sure I'm going to get baptized, get baptized. It's okay. You can go home soaking wet. It's okay. We'll get you a t-shirt. We'll get you a towel. We're going to have a blast. Sign up today, would you? Let us know. Like, mark on your connection card, go to ourjourney.news. Mark, I want to get baptized. Because, man, there's nothing more powerful, more life-changing than obedience to God. Do what he wants you to do and just keep doing that. Your most important step is your next one. The last thing. And we haven't done it yet today. And I can feel that question in our midst. What about communion? Every single week at Journey, we do communion. I didn't grow up in a church that did communion every week. I grew up in a church that did communion quarterly. How many grew up in quarterly church, right? You do quarterly. I don't know why they picked quarterly. Why did they not pick thirdly? Why did they not make, like biannually? I don't know why we picked quarterly, but we did. Every 3 months, we were going to take communion together, right? And we were going to do this thing. Some people had special services. We do it every week, and the question we have all the time is, why do we do it every week? In fact, sometimes people will come to me and they'll be like, Jeremy, I don't know if I can take communion every week. I'm like, that's cool. You can take it quarterly. Just set a reminder on your watch and ignore it the other 11 times. I don't care. It doesn't bother us. Why do we do it every week? For us, I want you to know this very simple thing. We take communion every week because it reminds us, every single one of us, that we need Jesus. And here's the thing I love, is that communion is our common union. It's the only thing, really, that at the end of the day, we all have exactly in common. We all need Jesus. Like, I love the fact that when you come to Journey, whether you've had a really great week or a really bad week, we need Jesus, right? Whether you got saved 25 or 35 or 45 years ago, or you got saved last weekend, we need Jesus exactly the same. That's the thing that sometimes we forget, is we forget sometimes, and we start to think that I needed Jesus back then, and I've got him now. But I don't know about you, but I need Jesus today. And that's really the important thing that I would say for us that we can understand here, is that you and I get an opportunity to take communion every single week because it reminds us that I still and always need Jesus. I need his presence in my life. I need his power in my life. I need him to show up and deliver again and again and again and again and again. And I don't need that 20 years ago and never have to remember it again. I need it. If we could do communion every day, I'd do communion every day. I sometimes will take communion 2 times in the same day here, because there are some times where I'm like, man, I just need to be reminded again. And I might need to take it another minute from now, because it's, again, a tradition, not a superstition, that allows me to be reminded that I always need Jesus. You know, what's a tradition at the end of the day? It's something we do repetitive, something we do over and over and over again to express, right, who we are or where we want to be. It's like the reason we do fan traditions is because it expresses our excitement about our team. And that's why we do the things that we do. We get together on Sundays, we sing together, we take communion, we baptize people, because it helps us express, reveal our heart, and lead our own heart toward Jesus. We sing this song a lot of times around here called Do It Again. And it's really, isn't that just a tradition? Jesus, do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Show up, because these walls around me, I thought they'd be gone by now, but I just need you to do it again. You've provided for me before. I just need you to do it again. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to sing that song together. And then when you sit down, the ushers are going to come up and they're going to hand you a tray. And if you're here today and you're a follower of Jesus, it doesn't matter to us if Journey's your home or not. We care about you and we're thrilled you're here. And if you'll just, when it passes by, take a little piece of bread and a little cup of juice, and you just take some time away from the noise that's around you, and you just take that piece of bread and that little cup of juice and be reminded that you didn't just need Jesus back then, that you need Jesus today and every day of your life. But if you're here today and that's not your story yet, maybe you're asking questions about faith and the whole thing's kind of arm's length for you. Maybe you're kind of on the bubble of whether or not you even believe about Jesus, and you're just kind of a little weirded out by some of the traditions and the things around here. Let me just encourage you this. We're so thrilled that you're here. We created Journey Church so that you have a safe and healthy and simple place to push back and to ask questions. And there's nobody in this room who wants you to do anything that you're not comfortable doing. So when you get to that place where the tray comes up to you, feel free to hand it to the person next to you, because there's some folks in this room that are just like you. You won't be the only one who doesn't. And you just take a couple of seconds and maybe just consider some of the things that we've been talking about, because this is a good day for you to take your next step toward Jesus. Let's stand and sing together.